construction and assembly of my chessboard is complete. But the project isn't complete because now, of course, I need to finish it. The first thing I did was sand all of the surfaces down. I just took it down to 220 grit. I didn't need to go any finer than that because the finish will be nice and smooth. The next thing I wanted to make sure I did was to get rid of all of the dust that has been left over after working on this project, all the sawdust and sanding dust. So I vacuumed all the surfaces in the entire shop, including light fixtures, anything up above that might fall down, and I then vacuumed all of the surfaces of the project itself to get out all of the sawdust. And next I'll take a tack cloth to it and get rid of even more dust. Okay, I've gone over it with the tack cloth really well, picked up a lot more dust, and finally what I want to do to further clean it is I use naphtha. You can use mineral spirits and rub it on all the surfaces. Not only will this pick up any additional grains of sawdust, it'll also let you know if there's any glue that's sticking anywhere. It'll show up as a discoloration, and that'll give me a chance to sand it off and get rid of that. But it's looking pretty good, and this is going to be a really clean surface to work on. Now, I had a lot of choices to use when finishing this. I knew right away I didn't want to put any stain on it because the walnut and the maple is just beautiful on its own, but I do need a protective covering. Now, I could use polyurethane, which I use a lot. It's a nice product to use, but it has some disadvantages. You have to sand between coats, and it can take 24 hours between coats. You want to wait for it to dry, and it just takes a long time. I've become a real fan of brushing lacquer, which is similar to the lacquer that you can spray on, but this you can brush on, and you can apply additional coats in about 30 minutes, and you don't need to sand between coats because each layer just chemically bonds to the one beneath it. So before I get started on the lacquer, I need to seal it, and I need to apply some wood filler on the top of the board. I want the top to have a really smooth, mirror-like, glossy, glassy finish. And the walnut is kind of like oak. It has a really open grain on it, and to get a smooth surface, we'll need to fill those pores. And so what you need is wood filler, and this is different than the kind of wood filler that you use to fill holes. This won't fill big holes. What it does is it packs into the grain of open grain woods, such as walnut. And what it comes out of is kind of a paste, and that needs to be thinned down. And to do that, you can use mineral spirits, or again, I just use naphtha, and just pour some in there, and you stir it up, and you want this to be about the consistency of, heavy cream. Okay, now's a good time to pull out an old brush that may have paint stuck in it. It's stiff, it's no good for anything else, but for applying wood filler, it's great. Now I've got that all mixed up, and kind of want to work quickly, and you just smear it on in sections like so. And what you want to do is the brush is just packing it into the grain of the walnut. The maple has such a tight grain, it's really not going to do much for it, but the walnut, it's going to be nice. Okay, now I've got it all applied, and I'm going to take some sort of a squeegee. This is just a plastic, kind of a palette knife, and you want to pack it in there. This removes all the excess and packs that wood filler into the grain. You notice I'm going across the grain here. That'll help pack it in. You don't really want to go with the grain, or that would just pull it out of the grain. Just keep packing it in like so. Wipe off any excess. Okay, I'm pushing really hard. Make sure it's all down on the edges. I'm trying to still go against the grain. And that's not too bad. You don't have to get it all off of there. You just want to make sure it's all packed into the grain. Now we'll just wait for that to dry, and it'll haze over, and that'll take about 15 minutes. Well, it looks like the wood filler is hazed over. It's kind of getting this milky look and it's pretty dry. So what I do is you take a piece of burlap and just fold it into a section here, and you just start again packing this into the grain. And if you notice, I'm rubbing this against the grain, maybe at a 45-degree angle. I just don't want to run this way or it'll just pull that soft wood filler out of the grain. So I'll just keep going over this, finding a new section, and packing it in. This part just takes a lot of elbow grease. Now that I've got that all rubbed in, it's already starting to take on a glossy feel, and I can rub my hand across it and it feels nice. The only problem is now I've got to wait about 24 hours before I can do anything more to it, and at that point I will lightly sand it down and smooth it out some more. Now that I've waited 24 hours for the wood filler to dry, I'm just going to lightly sand it using 320 grit sandpaper, and just use the back of or the palm of my hand as a sanding block, and this will further smooth it out. It may kind of look like you're ruining the surface by sanding it, and it looks kind of scratched up, but really all you're doing is removing the excess filler that's on top of the wood. The filler that's in the grain should stay in there and it'll still be smooth.